A storm of steel and fire rages over the Black Sea each dawn, and the question haunts every resident: why does the sky over this peninsula sound like a constant artillery drum? Ukrainian drones and missiles pierce the air daily, shattering the illusion of invincibility. The relentless barrage has stripped Crimea of its once reliable power, leaving homes in a dim, cold hush. The energy lifeline has snapped, and a new, harsher reality settles in. The numbers read like a warning sign. By mid-2025, 13 oil refineries across the Russian Federation will have shut down, stripping the region of about 119.2 million tons of annual capacity. Among those silenced are the few plants that once served Crimea. State giants Rosneft, Gazprom, Lukoil, and others favor their private pipelines, refusing to feed the market. The result: gasoline queues stretch like metallic ribbons, each sign flashing 1015L only. A 95 fuel, once priced at 70.79 rubles per liter, now costs 72.27 rubles, while 95 octane disappears from shelves and 92 octane trickles in at irregular intervals. Diesel rationing looms, reserved for ambulances and service fleets. Will the next fuel pump burst open, or will the silence of empty tanks grow louder? Winter's icy breath approaches, and the peninsula's fragile supply chain shivers. Bridges, ferries, and coastal terminals, once the veins delivering oil and gas, are clogged, their routes blocked by the very conflict that sparked the crisis. Local footage shows lines that linger into night, turning calm queues into heated disputes. Officials promise a 2-week fix. Yet the bottleneck widens as demand spikes and external lines falter. Can the broken arteries be mended before the frost freezes the last remaining hope? Beyond the pumps, a deeper wound spreads. 10 Russian refineries lie crippled, their combined capacity loss nearing a fifth of the nation's output. Baltic export hubs such as Primorsk and Luga sit under repair, sending wholesale fuel prices soaring and leaving Crimean households to barter with card terminals and whispered pleas. With heating fuel, generator diesel, and agricultural supplies all caught in the same chain, the entire winter of 2025-2026 hangs on a trembling thread. When the cold finally bites, will the people find a warm refuge, or will the exodus become the only escape? Summary: the previous segment showed the Kremlin's miscalculations, with gasoline price climbing from 70.79 to 72.27 rubles per liter. What if the pumps you trust become silent, metallic ribbons stretched across stations, offering only 10-liter tickets before noon, while the bitter scent of cold asphalt mixes with rising panic, and an approaching winter threatens to freeze the entire peninsula in a relentless fuel drought? In the early dawn, queues coil like steel cords in front of every gas station. Signs flash only 10 to 15L. Some districts announce a total lack of 95 octane fuel. Occasionally, 92 octane drips in, like raindrops on cracked pavement. More than half of the stations have halted gasoline sales entirely. Even diesel limits are whispered in hurried meetings. Ambulances and service vehicles receive the highest priority, cutting off ordinary drivers. Loudspeakers blare repetitive warnings, echoing across empty streets. This is not a simple supply glitch. Winter's shadow draws nearer, cracking the most fragile link of the fuel chain: heating, transport, basic logistics. Daily life morphs into a strict schedule of measured consumption. Local videos capture endless lines stretching into dusk, sparking angry shouts and heated arguments. Administrators plead for patience, promising improvements within 2 weeks. Yet officials' calm masks a convergence of harsh realities. Supply has collapsed across Crimea. Logistical bottlenecks swell, while seasonal demand spikes dramatically. The peninsula's production capacity remains critically low. All needs rely on bridges and sea routes. Fragile lifelines now under siege. When that external line is blocked, Crimea is isolated, cut off from the mainland. A stark question rises: can the broken line be mended before winter arrives? Or will these endless queues become the new normal for residents? The current crisis did not erupt overnight. Ukraine's deep strikes have disabled at least 10 Russian refineries, removing nearly 1/5 of national capacity. Major Baltic export terminals, such as Primorsky and Luga, entered forced repair periods, sending wholesale fuel prices soaring nationwide. Crimea bears the brunt of this shock, its limited storage and transport channels strained to the breaking point. As the cold season approaches, every beep of a fuel pump becomes a lifeline, every pause a reminder of an uncertain future. The last chapter left us pondering whether Crimea's fuel crisis could be resolved before the harsh winter arrives, or if long lines for gasoline would become a permanent fixture. The situation, it turns out, is a culmination of ongoing turmoil. Ukraine's deep military strikes have rendered at least 10 refineries in Russia ineffective, crippling nearly half of the oil processing capabilities. As we explore the aftermath, we find ourselves grappling with a stark, dual reality. On one side, cracks are appearing in Russia's energy framework, and infrastructure under siege due to ongoing conflict. On the other, Crimea's precarious supply chain is crumbling, caught in the crossfire. The issue extends beyond just diesel. Heating oil, generator diesel, essential agricultural fuel, and gas pressure management face similar threats. As the government implements rationing measures, the once reliable flow of fuel to consumers has dwindled. Drivers now rely heavily on card payments, as local gas stations struggle to stock enough fuel. Authorities have shifted their tone, trading promises for acceptance and drawing a thin veil over greater frustrations. "We're asking for your patience," has morphed into a grim acquiescence. The fires may have been quelled at some refineries, but the repercussions of those shutdowns ripple into Crimea, with delays stretching weeks into unbearable waits. Understanding this upheaval requires a look at Crimea's supply structure. The peninsula lacks a solid refinery base, severely reliant on fuel imported from the mainland. Its intricate network bridges, ferries, repurposed ammunition depots, coastal terminals, and inland storage functions as a delicate chain. That strength is fading fast, as repeated drone strikes wreak havoc on Russian refineries. At present, at least 10 of these facilities are out of commission, paralyzing around 20% of the nation's oil processing potential. The chronic disruption at key shipping hubs, especially in Primorsk and Luga, creates a domino effect that shakes not just exports but local logistics. The odds of supply reaching Crimea are dwindling, leaving residents caught in a gridlock of desperation. As the temperature dips and winter approaches, how will these multiple pressures manifest in the daily lives of the people who call Crimea home? Voices filled with frustration echo through the lines at filling stations. What will we do when we run dry, they wonder. As unrest simmers beneath the surface, a haunting question remains: is this just the beginning of a struggle that will reshape life on the peninsula forever? A question that haunts every driver on the peninsula: why does the fuel pump hiss like a dying animal while the winter wind howls outside, and will the next queue be the one that empties the tank forever? The answer lurks in a web of shattered pipelines, abandoned refineries, and a looming cold that could freeze the whole region. Earlier we learned that at least 10 refineries across the country have been knocked silent, stripping roughly 17 to 20% of total capacity. Disruptions at the Primorsk port and the Luga processing hub have tangled export routes and domestic logistics alike, turning smooth flows into snarled bottlenecks. Now, imagine tanker traffic, railway loading windows and pipeline valves moving in lockstep, all governed by the same digital heartbeat. When that rhythm falters, Transneft sounded the alarm, warning producers of imminent cuts. The result? Wholesale prices for Euro 95 surged more than 50%, and regional shortages erupted like sudden fissures in the ice. Crimea, cut off from its own fuel sources, is forced to chase expensive imports. The gas dilemma sharpens as winter approaches, turning every breath of cold air into a reminder of scarcity. Malgas, the lifeline that heats homes and powers generators, draws partly from offshore platforms, its pressure chain riddled with friction. Any extra snag could cripple the peninsula's ability to meet peak demand during the darkest hours. Open-source analysts now label the coming season, winter 2025-2026, as a full-blown fuel crisis. The shock to petroleum supplies does not merely dim car tanks, it seeps into heating fuel, standby generators, and boiler feeds. Though refinery damage does not directly choke gas pipelines, the same network of pumping stations, compressors, and alternative fuel lines trembles at the shock's edge. Even the power grid, already flirting with high-risk windows in summer, now faces secondary threats: fluttering debris, stray damage, and sudden demand spikes that stretch maintenance cycles thin. The shortage is not a single story about gasoline, it pulls at every link of the energy chain. Local authorities must now juggle fuel allotments and electricity plans while bracing for the heating season. Picture a barrel with many taps. Block one, and pressure forces another to burst, leaking elsewhere. As winter draws near, how will these pressures be balanced? Will the next cold snap the fragile network, leaving the peninsula in darkness? The answer hangs in the next silent night. Imagine standing at a cramped fuel pump as winter winds howl, the meter flashing a price that could fund a small family's monthly bills, while the crowd behind you chants that the government has turned hope into a daily queue. How many more hours will citizens endure before the line itself becomes a symbol of a crumbling state? The answer may lie in the silent cracks of a peninsula once considered impregnable, now echoing with the sound of empty tanks and restless sighs. In the previous segment we described how electricity plants clash with heating needs, like taps in a barrel where a blockage raises pressure elsewhere. The public's reaction mirrors the rising tension across the peninsula, echoing daily strain. Days without calm morning bulletins have multiplied, and angry waves ripple through every street. Crimea sits not on the edge but at the center of this fury. Local stations broadcast recorded pleas, voices trembling with fatigue. Drivers mutter, 3 hours in line, their breath fogging cold air. Shopkeepers announce, only 10 liters each, eyes starting to dwindle in gauges. Families wonder how to reach work or ferry children to school, footsteps echoing hollowly. This is more than a missing pump, it erodes the very sense of order. Daily life becomes costlier and unpredictable, like a fire that never fully dies. Uncertainty wears down patience, each tick of the clock amplifying dread. As patience thins, questions of cause and effect flood political debate. What has the conflict truly delivered? Not abstract theory, but an empty refrigerator, a silent engine, a child walking alone. Government calls for patience feel hollow without concrete solutions, promises fading like winter mist. The ritual repeats, queue at dusk, wait at dawn, fill limits by noon, return at night. One thought dominates the crowd, this cannot continue. Some merely grumble, others pack bags, seeking escape beyond the coast. Each departing family writes a different excuse, yet themes converge, insecurity, pressure, children's future, unbearable expenses. Will the broken supply line ever mend before the first snow falls, or will the queues become the new normal? In recent years, an unsettling tide of migrations has surged from Crimea. Families now cling to their reasons for departing, but beneath those explanations, a shared sense of insecurity lingers. The rise in economic strife, political oppression, and cultural pressures has pushed many to the brink. As one young man bravely escaped the clutches of forced re-education and an activist found refuge from relentless persecution, they became part of a growing narrative, a struggle against the increasing urgency to leave. Today, the weight of a dire fuel crisis adds a chilling momentum to this exodus. Residents venturing beyond the shores of Crimea seek not merely a physical escape but the promise of a life unchained from the burdens of uncertainty. Each person who departs leaves behind not just familiarity, but also echoes of their anguish. Daily essentials vanish from grocery shelves and gas stations announce depletion with grim signs. It's as if migration becomes a primal instinct amidst the chaos, a necessary response to endure through this turmoil. Faced with amplified security measures on both land and sea routes, the drive to leave remains undeterred. The fuel shortage acts as a catalyst, exacerbating social tensions that already threaten to boil over. This situation transcends mere economic hardship, it's a crisis demanding profound management of daily existence. So, what's the Kremlin's strategy in response to this escalating fuel crisis in Crimea? The first approach is an attempt to stanch the flow of turmoil through price manipulation and export controls. Recent regulations diverted gasoline intended for export back into the domestic economy. Yet, administrative pressure to fix wholesale prices created gaps that sowed further unrest. The second facet of Moscow's plan involves reallocating fuel supply quotas to the peninsula amid increasing domestic scarcity. This, however, only complicates an already convoluted situation, as desperate measures in one area can lead to shortages in another. Lastly, the effort to hasten repairs on damaged refineries cannot be overlooked. Some facilities sustain severe damage not only to their structures but also to crucial safety systems and control centers. Restoring operational integrity isn't just about fixing pipes, it's a meticulous process that takes considerable time and resources. As we witness this unfolding drama, the question arises, amidst all the uncertainty and discontent, how long can the people of Crimea endure this life? What desperate measures will they take, and at what cost? Is the hidden war on fuel turning Crimea into a ghost town, where the scent of diesel fades and long queues become daily rituals? What if the pipes that once sang with oil are now silent, and every sunrise brings a fresh line of desperate faces? The answer lies in a chain of broken links that threatens a whole winter. The peninsula's plight began with a cascade of strikes that crippled Russia's refining heart. By mid-2025, 13 major plants worth 119.2 million tons of annual output were offline, some located right on Crimean soil. Prices rose from 70.79 to 72.27 rubles per liter, and pumps now flash limits of 10 to 15 liters. In several districts, premium 95-octane vanished entirely, while 92-octane dribbles in at irregular intervals. More than half of the stations have halted sales, and diesel is rationed, reserved for ambulances and service fleets. The air is thick with the metallic clang of fuel trucks and the low murmur of frustrated commuters. How long can this rationing endure before the cold bites deeper? Next, the crisis spreads beyond the peninsula's borders, exposing a systemic flaw. Crimea is not a refinery, it is a web of storage bays, transfer hubs, and coastal depots around Feodosia and Sevastopol. Fires at these nodes have scarred safety systems, pipelines, and control rooms, demanding not just metal replacement but full safety certification. Meanwhile, the main Russian export terminals at Primorsky and Luga have been forced into repair, shattering the nation's shipping schedule. Even if local tanks stay intact, the lifeblood, fuel arriving from the mainland, dries up like a well without a pump. The question looms, can the fragmented network be patched before winter's freeze seals the breach? Finally, the bitter reality settles on the ground. With external pipelines throttled, every household feels the chill of uncertainty. Queues stretch into evenings, arguments echo in grocery aisles, and families barter for 10-liter coupons. Authorities repeat pleas for patience, yet the promise of 2 weeks feels hollow as shortages ripple through heating fuel, generator diesel, and agricultural supplies. The peninsula's fate now hinges on distant pipelines and foreign imports from Belarus, Kazakhstan, and China, none of which can arrive fast enough to stave off a black winter. Will the next sunrise reveal a thawing line, or will the cold silence the last remaining pumps? The answer hangs on a single, fragile conduit, waiting to crack under the weight of an entire region's hope. In the heart of the Crimean Peninsula, a crisis is unfolding, casting a shadow on the lives of its residents. Every day, Ukrainian drone strikes are targeting energy facilities, leading to a severe energy shortage that permeates every aspect of life. With the impending winter, the stakes are rising, and the question looms, can the energy supply chain be salvaged before the cold sets in? As the conflict escalates, the region's energy infrastructure suffers. Strikes on refineries have crippled operations, with estimates that by mid-2025, 13 refineries in Russia could shut down, dramatically affecting Crimea's energy availability. This fear has made residents feel trapped, scrambling to find oil and gas while authorities struggle to manage dwindling supplies. Rationing has become a reality, and gas stations now often run dry. Imagine standing in line at a gas station, the air thick with tension and frustration as voices rise over the roar of engines. People are left waiting for hours, only to be limited to a meager 10 liters. Each face reflects a blend of exhaustion and anger, questioning how everyday life spiraled into such turmoil. Will this chaos be the new normal, or can any relief be found? Compounding the crisis, governmental affiliations with key companies hinder fair distribution. State-owned giants seem to prioritize their networks, leaving the average citizen to grapple with rising prices, currently pushing 72.27 rubles per liter for a 95 gasoline. With winter approaching, every drop becomes essential for heating and survival. But as dependency on imported fuel grows, so do logistical complications. What happens if supply chains fail completely? The dynamics morph into a delicate balancing act, the intense pressure of demand versus the minimal supply. Residents are left pondering, can their daily lives bear this strain? Migrants leaving for better prospects are becoming a common sight, each carrying a story of hardship, insecurity, and a desperate wish for a brighter future. Faced with the relentless waves of fuel shortages and escalating costs, families find themselves questioning their very existence on the peninsula. How much longer can they endure the scarcity? What sacrifices will they have to make to ensure their children's futures? As the bitter cold of winter nears, the pressing question remains, will the lifeline of Crimea be severed further? With the geopolitical landscape shifting, the people brace themselves for an uncertain path ahead. They need answers, and they need action. After all, when the very supplies vital for life run thin, the cracks in society begin to show. Will tomorrow bring hope, or will despair deepen under the frost? As these thoughts linger, one thing becomes painfully clear: change is not just imminent, it's essential. What if the gasoline you rely on vanished overnight? Imagine walking to a pump, hearing the familiar sigh of fuel, then spotting a sign that limits you to just 10 liters. The price has already jumped from 70.79 rubles to 72.27 per liter in a few weeks. Drones and missiles have turned the refineries that once fed the peninsula into smoldering ruins. Could this be the end of the region's lifeline, or merely the opening act of a deeper collapse? Every sunrise brings fresh warnings, every night the queues stretch like cold steel ribbons across barren stations. Who will decide who receives the last drop as winter looms? The previous scene described a sudden shortage and soaring prices, now we see the infrastructure crumbling beneath the strain. By mid-2025, 13 oil refineries across the Russian Federation, totaling roughly 119.2 million tons of capacity, will be shut down, some located right on the Crimean shore. 10 additional plants have already gone silent after relentless strikes, knocking 20% of total output offline. The wholesale market has felt a 50% surge, and gasoline stations report empty bays, diesel limits, and priority lines for ambulances and service trucks. Can the remaining network reroute enough fuel through bridges, ferries, and coastal terminals before the cold cuts deeper? Earlier we learned the refineries are silent, now the human cost emerges. Residents stand in long, noisy lines, the air heavy with the smell of stale diesel and winter frost. Local officials repeat pleas for patience. Yet the promises feel hollow as each hour brings another halt. Storage depots dry up, and even the most efficient allocation plans fail when the tanks themselves are empty. With the bridge still intact but the supply chain fractured, the question remains, will another strike shatter the last lifeline tomorrow? The answer will decide whether fuel stays a mere commodity or becomes the ultimate measure of legitimacy in a region teetering on the brink of social unrest.